What was life like in the 1970s?
Well, I was kind of young in the 70s, in the early 70s, and I think what was different is we were always outside. Um, my parents and most of my friends' parents made us play in the neighborhood. We never really got to play in anybody's houses. Didn't matter if it was winter or not. So, did a lot of outside stuff. We were allowed to pretty much ride our bikes anywhere in the city that we wanted to. There was not nearly the concern of things happening to children that there are today. Um, we had, as kids, a lot more freedom to do things. The other thing that was different is organized activities weren't quite as demanding as they are today. Um, you played some sports, but it was, just for weeks or a couple of months at a time rather than year round. So a lot of the stuff that you did with your friends would pick up uh, softball games or hockey games or football, and we rode a lot of bikes and so on. The um, cars were much different. We didn't have to wear seat belts. We rode in the back of station wagons, rode in the back of pickup trucks, um, and people just weren't quite as concerned about accidents or things like that happening. Um, Clothing was quite different, kind of funny. Housing was different. Um, so um, I guess there was a lot of differences, just simpler. Times were a lot simpler than they are today. And other things were uh, not, housing was much smaller, and everybody just lived kind of a much simpler existence before electronics.
What were some of the popular hangout spots and activities that you would do with friends?
Um, some of the hangout spots were just generally in the neighborhood. You were always outside, like I said before. Um, we spent a lot of time down at the end of our city block. There was a bank down there, and we did everything at the bank, from play bike tag to play kickball games to play tennis on the side of the bank building. Um, Other hangout spots were actually the playground at the elementary school, um, where we played football, pick up football, played kickball, played um, uh, softball, if I didn't mention that already. Another hangout was a place called the Bonton, which was a donut shop. And then the Bonton actually got a whole bunch of pinball machines when I was probably about 10 years old. That was middle 70s. Um, and if you could rustle up enough money, you could go and play pinball all afternoon or all evening. Um, some of the other popular spots, there was a place called Seidel's Lake, and you could catch pretty much any type of fish, from sunfish to bullheads to carp, all kinds of frogs, all kinds of turtles. So we spent a lot of time at Seidel's Lake, and then there was also Seidel's Fields, where we could take our mini bikes up to, could push them through town and get up to the Seidel's Fields, and there was a whole bunch of mini bike trails that you could ride on as a kid.
What was the most popular kind of music?
The most popular kind of music at the time, I think, was um, kind of what's called old time rock and roll today. Uh, Bob Seger, Bob Dylan, Neil Young, um, uh, trying to The Who, The Beatles were still popular, so kind of rock and roll. Pop music started coming in the 70s. There was still some disco music, and country music was pretty big back then too. And then classical music, the Lawrence Welk show was kind of the grandma and grandpa's favorite back then.
What were some popular dance moves?
The big dance craze was disco. I don't know what the moves were, but it it was very fast moving. A lot of strobe lights and stuff like that to kind of make it a dance mood. I remember polka still being big at all kinds of weddings. A lot of polka music was danced to, and then it was disco was the big thing, I guess.
What were some of the major clothing trends?
Bell bottoms were really big. The kind of the polyester pants were kind of an in thing, but also kind of just a something that everybody had or wore. There was a type of shirt, and I don't know, it was kind of like a nylon shirt. It always had designs like pictures on the front of it, and they were probably the most uncomfortable shirts you could ever wear, but everybody had them and thought they were the thing. Trying to think of some of the other clothing trends. Platform shoes were still big. They kind of went with the disco stuff. Kind of some, that's when you started getting some of the real wild colors in the clothing that was popular.
What were common hairstyles among men and women?
Women, like I remember my mom and all my aunts having the big, I think they called it the beehive. Their hair was really, really high. Men, that was kind of the feathered look. So they parted their hair in the middle and combed it back, and it was, feathered hair. I think at the end of the 70s is when the younger women wore the big hair, so they curled it up and made it really, really big and on top. Those were probably the main ones.
What were some major world events that you remember?
Well, the Vietnam War ended in the 70s. We had a major gas shortage in the 70s. The Iran hostage crisis was a big event at the end of the 70s. Watergate was in the early 70s. That was a major political event. What were some of the other things? Did I say the Beatles broke up? The Beatles broke up in the 70s. What else? Oh, Japan kind of took over as the top economy in the world. They really made some big strides in the manufacturing side of things, and that's about all I can think of.
What were some of the new technologies that first appeared?
Color TV, at least at my house. I don't know when it came in, but we never had a color TV until the 70s. Microwave came in the 70s. Actually, it was kind of the beginning of Some computers, I think they had some of the older computers with really, really large floppy disks that ran them. Other technology. Yeah, I don't know about anything else.
What were some popular movies?
Jaws, The Godfather. I think The Godfather Part 2 was also in the 70s. Grease, Saturday Night Fever. It's a movie that I remember. I don't know how popular it was, but it was called Racing with the Devil. It's kind of a horror film or a scary film. Apocalypse Now. That's about all I can remember.
Who were some popular actors and actresses?
Clint Eastwood was popular back then. John Wayne was still popular, even though it was kind of at the end of his career. You had actors like, Farrah Fawcett. She was a TV actor. Bruce Majors, who was the $6 Million Man. He was popular. Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner were popular. That's all I can think of.
What were popular TV shows?
Starsky and Hutch, Beretta. They were two police shows. Charlie's Angels, The Love Boat, The Lawrence Welk Show. There were some game shows. I think that's when The Price is Right, started. That was popular. Soap operas were popular. What else? That's all I can think of.
What were some chores or house activities that you had to do?
A lot. We as kids had to do both inside and outside work. So the household chores range from washing dishes, because dishwashers were really not very common. The vacuuming, dusting, pretty much cleaning the entire house, because both my parents worked back then, and the kids were responsible for cleaning the entire house. Outside, we had to mow the lawn, rake. We had apple trees in our yard. We had to always pick up, apples. Painting. Back then, most of the homes were wood siding, and they needed to be painted every, 5 to 7 years, and that was in our house. The kids were responsible for that. Shoveling snow. No such thing as a snowblower at our house back then. Planting flowers. So pretty much anything that needed to be done.
What sports or activities did you do in or outside of school?
I played, as a young kid in the 70s, I played softball. I played football. Where I grew up, hockey was very, very popular, and I played hockey. I was in track and field. Played pickup basketball outside of school. Trying to think if there were any other sports. Was it activities and sports, or just sports?
Activities.
And activities. And then the activities were Cub Scouts. a lot of various church activities. Um, that's about it.
What were some slang words that developed in the 70s?
Well, some of those are the same ones that are today. They, I guess, just started then. I remember for a while everything was cool, and the word "dude" kind of was started to be used. Um, Slang, bummer was everything was a bummer. Um, that's a tough question. I don't remember very many slang words.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
Um, I wanted to be a race car driver when I grew up. That was my primary desire. I also thought I wanted to be a mechanic, and the other thing that I always kind of wanted to do was be a fireman.
Do you remember any popular car styles?
Yeah, um, the Chevy Chevelle was very popular. The Mustang was popular. In the later '70s, the Trans Am was very popular. El Caminos were popular. Um, what else? VW Beetles were pretty popular. Um, Trucks have always been popular, and they were pretty big in the '70s also.
What were some of your favorite toys, or what were some popular toys when you were growing up?
Um, Probably the most popular toy was your bicycle. Everybody had a bike, and that's how everybody got everywhere. And some of the other toys were play Tonka trucks. They were steel built trucks, and they had dump trucks and road graders and loaders and so on. And I also played a lot with tractors. um, some of the other toys, I guess, were big wheels. Huh, that's about all I can think of.
What were some of your favorite childhood games?
Um, so like board games, Monopoly and Risk, um, Sorry, and then games to play outside. We always used to play ditch, played kick the can. Um, you know, always played tag out on the school grounds. Um, Played King of the Hill in the winter with snow. I mean, on big snow piles. Um, you know, all the sporting type games: football, softball, pick up basketball, hockey. That's about the extent of what I can remember.
So, what's your favorite memory from growing up in the 70s?
I think my favorite memory is being outside in our neighborhood playing with all the kids. There was a lot of kids in the neighborhood. There was always something to do. And whenever you got up in the morning, you just went out and everybody congregated or met in the alley. And then you decide what you were going to do for the day. And, you usually would not go much further than, your 2 city blocks that you were on, and there was always people to play with and always something to do. You'd play all day until it was lunchtime, and your mom would holler for you, and you'd go home and eat lunch, and then you'd go back out and do it again, and then somebody'd holler for you for dinner, and you'd come back in, and then usually you were back outside playing something until you had to come in and get ready for bed. That's when I was younger, and then kind of when I was fifth, sixth grade, it was in the summertime. It was the swimming pool, so we all went to Lorraine Park, and the pool opened at 1:00 in the afternoon and stayed open until 9:00 at night, and most of us were there for the entire 8 hours, except for running home for a half hour to have dinner and then coming back. So those were very fun memories.